My name is Grace, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today, I am interviewing Arista Holmes, and I am so glad to have them back on. I reviewed their book, I think, as an ARC. It's called Changeling. It's a young adult fantasy, portal fantasy, and it's a lot of fun. So I'm super glad to have the chance to chat with them today about their story.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So, would you like to introduce yourself and what you like to write?
hmm As you said, I'm Arista Holmes. I mainly write fantasy, but Changeling is specifically a portal contemporary fantasy.
Awesome. So, Changeling follows the story of a young fairy named Lizzie, and she goes to the human world looking for her mother, who has been presumed dead. And she brings her best friend Booker with her, and they end up encountering a bunch of vampires, and they're looking for her mother, and there might be a conspiracy involved. So, like, there's a bunch of interesting stuff going on. So, my first question is, how did you come up for the world building for the Fey world of Arbaon? I hope I'm saying that
Yep.
right. Um,
Arbaean, yep.
there's a bunch of really interesting stuff there. I'll let you choose how much spoilers you want to go into, but how did you come up with the world building for that?
Um, it was multi-layered. So originally, like in the very, very first iteration of the world, it was going to be two different types of vampires, but it was too it didn't give Lizzie enough distinction as a character. So then I had to sort of brainstorm how different I wanted them to be. And the Fae sort of grew out of that. Within the world, the female Fae are the only ones with wings. That was inspired almost directly from the Gelflings in the Dark Crystal.
Oh,
And I
fun.
really wanted to and I really wanted to explore how a species that had such two distinct forms between what's perceived male and female influenced their society. Um, because, of course, if anyone doesn't know, the Gelflings and the Dark Crystal are almost extinct. There's like two left. But I wanted to explore how that worked within a society and what differences that gave characters who maybe didn't fit what was perceived as the norm, which is why Lizzie is a female fae who was born without wings. And that's a motivating facet for her character throughout the stories of her finding someplace she feels like she fits in. Um, yeah, that was that was really the main focus. Everything else built out from around that. Um, and it was her losing her mother was a real propelling focus for her to step outside of what she found comfortable, um, and realize that maybe where she thought she wasn't the best place for her.
Yeah, that's a really good point because her mother always encourages her, like, you might be different, but you're special, you're mine, like, I love you.
Yes.
But with her mother being gone, she's lost that support network. So that's
Yeah.
part of what motivates her to leave the Fey world. And you mentioned there's two different kind of vampires, and that's still an idea that
Yes.
perpetuates into the final version of the book that I read. So, do you mind telling us a bit more about the vampires as well as their feral counterparts, the Cavians or Cavians?
Yeah. So again, the very original did have two types of vampires, but I did actually scrap that idea for a while, almost entirely. And it was only when I was looking at what Lizzie might need to encounter to develop a more self-aware perception of herself that the ideas of the Cavians came about. So the Cavians are a twisted, poisoned version of the vampires. In the mortal realm, it's a case where modern humans have had so much toxins, so much pollutants that their blood is now poisonous to vampires. So the vampires that we mostly meet in Changeling are surviving off animal blood. Cavians are vampires that are fed on humans, and it's made them rabid, insane. Their driving purpose is just to find more of what they're addicted to. Um, And yeah, there's some underlying tension there where Lizzie obviously encounters a vampire very close to the beginning of the book. Sorry, a Cavian very close to the beginning of the book that she thinks is a vampire. uh, and it gives her insight into the two sides of the vampiric creatures that the rest of the mortal realm isn't currently aware of, which is the underlying conspiracy you mentioned.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and since there's these two sides, I mean, she ends up being with the vampires. This is the old back matter of the book sort of stuff. So
Yes.
um, that's the reason why I'm asking these questions, because it's back matter of the book sort of stuff.
Yes.
But she ends up at
Speculo school,
Specula
yes.
school with the vampires. So this tensions between these two different kinds of vampires and how they end up as Cavians is definitely a driving conflict in the book. And I
Yeah.
thought it was really interesting how you explore that, because vampire lore is so varied, and so there's so many different inspirations to draw from, because there's
Yeah.
this deep folklore associated with it, and this deep mythology and pop culture associated with it. So whenever you're writing a vampire story, you really have all this freedom to pick and choose what you want to draw from, and I thought the way that you explored it was very unique. Um,
Thank you.
so, and you also mentioned Lizzie is really driven by the mystery of her mother's death and grief and that loss. So,
Yeah.
how do you approach writing her character with that really powerful motivation, especially as she's navigating this new world and this human realm and this new society that she, doesn't fit into, and she's trying to find her place in?
I'm really close to my own mum. She's kind of my best friend. So slipping into Lizzie's headspace is surprisingly easy. I actually didn't expect it to be when I started writing it, but it's more thinking about what I would do, or more accurately, what I wouldn't do to find my mum if she was missing, right? So that's a really easy headspace for me to slip into. But of course, Lizzie's also much younger than I am. She's 17, turns 18 in the book, and she's also lived a life where she's very isolated, even amongst her own kind, because of her lack of wings. So she's very angry at the world, and she makes quite a lot of emotionally driven decisions that when I'm writing it, I'm like, oh, really? Is that the best move? No, it's not, but it's logical for her. And Booker goes with her to the mortal realm, and he's really the only other person whose opinion she values. But there's that special connection between her and her mum, and there is very little, I think, that she wouldn't do for her mum, and that element draws directly from my relationship with my mum. We are basically best friends, so it's quite an easy headspace to slip into.
That's really, really sweet, and that's sweet that you have your own relationship with your mom that way, and that you're able to draw from that experience. My next question is about Booker and her best friend. Since Booker comes with her to the human realm and ends up at the Specular school with her, can you talk a bit about their dynamic?
Yeah. Those two are joined at the hip. They really are. So Maddie, Lizzie's mum, adopted Booker when he was about 7, when his own parents were murdered, and Faye can die from a broken heart in Arbaean. So usually, if a child is orphaned or they suffer a loss like that, they would be handed off to other family members for that support network. But Booker didn't have anyone else, and Maddie was very good friends with his parents, so she adopted him, which means from sort of the age of 6 and 7, Lizzie and Booker were raised together and in a sibling-like relationship. And so they do have that joined at the hip mentality, because Lizzie's an outcast because of her lack of wings, and Booker has chosen to be an outcast because she basically helped him recover from the loss of his parents. It's essentially saving his life. So they really have that very deep bond. But in terms of their dynamic, they complement each other. So Lizzie's very anger driven and outspoken and risk taking, whereas Booker's much slower usually to make a decision unless Lizzie is driving him towards one, which is obviously seen in the opening chapters of Changeling. But they have that balance where they cover each other's weaknesses. Yeah, so he was originally, Booker was supposed to be based off My Best Friend, but it didn't quite work because My Best Friend is more like Lizzie. She'll dive into anything. But I also have an older brother, and I think that lent into a lot of Booker's caution and balance. So
Yeah, I think that fits really well, is that he's like an older brother to Lizzie and he's always looking out for her. I thought their
yeah,
dynamic was very, very sweet. And that adds a layer of complexity to that relationship, too, that he was orphaned and now Lizzie
yes,
finds herself orphaned when Maddie is presumed dead. And so they go
yes,
looking for her because the last known whereabouts was in the human realm. And so he's like, I know what you're going through.
yeah.
You need to not die on me. You're the only one I have left. Because he knows what that risk is. Like, he went through
He
that, and
does.
so he's the only one who can really understand Lizzie, and he's there for her no matter what. And I thought that their relationship was very compelling, because they have that background and that shared experience, even though it's not a
They
happy
do.
experience. It's a shared experience, and that connects them.
There's also a downside to that in that because he understands how at risk she is, he tends to give her a lot more leeway than he possibly should in what she wants to do. So
Yeah. Our other point of view character, because there's two point of views in this book, is Andric, and he's one of the vampires at Speculo, and he's got all these motivations of his own tied up in the conflict with the Kavians, and he becomes an ally to Lizzie and Booker. So, how did you develop his arc alongside Lizzie's, and which of the two point of views was your favorite to write?
Andric's an interesting one. Like you said, he has his own stakes in this conflict with the Cavians. So although he's a trained Cavian hunter, most vampires are. Um, but he's at the beginning of the book, he's just lost his brother. So he's also grieving, which gave a nice familiar point of reference between him and Lizzie. They're both going through their own stages of grief. And I think he recognizes a bit of himself in Lizzie, which is why he's so quickly interested in helping her. It's also a great distraction for him because then he doesn't have to think about his own problems. But it's a nice starting point for them. Of course, Lizzie finds him really annoying because she wants to do things on her own. She's used to doing things on her own. Um, which gave a nice dynamic as the story moved on. It was that push and pull of him wanting to help, her not really wanting him to help, but then you become a point where it switches around where she doesn't really have much of a choice. She can't do it on her own. Um, so yeah, it sort of developed that way until you reach a point, obviously closer to the end of the book, where it's a much more balanced relationship. Lizzie has some give, Andric gives a bit more, and it levels out. Book two, that I'm writing at the moment, is a much more balanced relationship between the two, but it's finding the same balance that Lizzie has with Booker, where they cover each other's weaknesses. In book two, Lizzie and Andric are more finding that balance now that they've agreed that working together is the better of the two options. As for favorite point of view, I should I should probably say Lizzie because she is my main point of view. But writing Andric was always a lot of fun. Um, because he grew up in the mortal realm, he knows the dynamics and he knows the world. So when I was writing scenes from Andric's point of view, it was more about um, him reacting to what was happening, as opposed to when I was writing Lizzie, it was more about her understanding and perceiving a situation. So it gave a little more freedom to write Andric's point of view. So that it was always a bit of a nice flip of a tone when I reached his chapters.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense that Lizzie is kind of the audience surrogate in that she's
Yeah,
approaching the new world building. Like, yeah, it's the human realm, but it's the human realm with all these supernatural elements. So it's this
Yes.
new fantasy realm that the audience is coming into along with Lizzie. And so we need to have all of this exposition given to us in a natural diegetic way. And so Andric facilitates that. And so when you're in Lizzie's chapters, you're getting the information given to you. But when you're in Andric's chapters, he already knows all of that, and so
Yeah.
he can react to it and like think about and strategize things more. And I can see how that would be a welcome break from the navigating. Okay, what exposition do I drop here in which chapter? Because I know that's
Yeah.
always a big struggle for me because it's like I have all the information up in here.
Exactly. It's dropping it in a natural manner. Yeah.
Yeah. Always, always, always exposition is tricky, but I think you do it in a very natural way.
Thank you.
Especially because they're in a high school, so that means that they're like taking classes and they're also dealing with other students. You have like classmates, cliques, mean girls drama, so you have a lot of other side characters, and they're all very vibrant. So give us a little bit of detail about them.
Building the classmates was admittedly really fun. Um, so plot-wise, I knew I needed Booker at certain points to be quite distracted from what Lizzie was doing. That really was the first character within the school that I built. So that was Cara Evelyn. And obviously within Changeling, she becomes his newest girlfriend. But she's obviously she's going to end up being more than that. But for the purposes of Changeling, she was no,
Spoilers.
it's there's no big spoilers, but I don't like introducing a character if they don't have more than just like surface purpose. So she'll end up having other roles later in the series, but for the purposes of Changeling, she was a a useful way not only to distract Booker, but also to show that just because Lizzie isn't the only outcast in the story. So Kara's parents became Cavians, and she's shunned within Speculo for that. So it was an interesting way to show that it's not just Lizzie who's an outcast because of her lack of wings. There's other characters who also feel that way, and it let Lizzie be able to relate to someone very quickly. But to be an outcast, of course, you need a mean girl. So Mia Harris is the mean girl. Everyone loves to hate her. I adore her character. She's so much fun to write. I really shouldn't. She's awful. But there's a flip side to Mia that I don't think anyone's really seen yet. She's got her own fears, her own concerns, her own problems, but she manages that by being in control of everything. So she's landed the spot as the headmaster's temporary receptionist, and I think you start to see a bit of her secondary personality closer to the end of the book when she helps out Andric a little bit. But yeah, it was really fun building the dynamics. There's Mia's little pair of friends, Kelsey and Blake, and the classrooms of students who may or may not find it amusing that certain teachers pick on Lizzie a bit, you know. Yeah.
Yeah, and being the only fae in a school full of vampires, like they have their work cut out for them to fit in and to adjust. So all of the class dynamics were very interesting. So now that we've had a good primer on the world that you've created, would you want to live there?
Yes. That's such an easy answer for me. I mean, it's part of the reason I write fantasy. I've given a chance to live in a fantasy world, it's always going to be yes. I think I would really want to be a vampire in this world, but I think I'd probably end up being a fae without wings like Lizzie. I was born with club feet, so there's a lot of things about my mobility that I can't do, and that influences Lizzie's inability to fly a lot. So I think I'd probably end up being in her situation in this world.
Yeah, And then disability representation is so important for so many reasons, and it's important that you included that, and I think that's really important. So, my last question, which I always like to ask my authors, is a freebie. So, if there's anything I forgot to ask about, anything you want to mention, feel free to ramble about it here.
Um, it's like you said with the disability representation, and that's always a tough one for me to talk about because my parents brought me up. I was never like, they never said, oh, you're disabled, you can't do this, you can't do that. They let me try. So when I was about I think 4 or 5, I wanted to be a ballet dancer, and they'd never said to me, you can't do that, with your legs. I couldn't. There was no way that was going to happen. But they bought me a VHS tape on how to learn ballet at home. So I never thought of myself as disabled. Not until I was in high school when it sort of came up amongst other students. And so when I was writing Lizzie as a fae born without wings, it never actually occurred to me that I was writing a disabled character until my best friend mentioned it. And I was like, oh, yeah, of course it is. That's absolutely it. So, yeah, it's an interesting one for me to talk about because I'm always a bit hesitant to label Lizzie as disabled for that reason. But I mean, you're right. She is amongst her own kind, amongst her own people. But I think that's also important that she doesn't see. I mean, Lizzie sees herself as broken because she doesn't fit in, but she doesn't actually see herself as disabled. There's things she can do that other fae can't, and she values those skills even if the fae don't necessarily value those skills. And I don't know, I think that's an important message. So.
Yeah, I love that take. And it's important too that depending on the environment that she's in, she can excel at things that other people can't. Because when she gets to the human
Yes,
realm, the infrastructure is built differently. It's not built for people with wings, it's built for people who don't have wings. It's built for other
exactly.
vampires who are running around on 2 feet. And so she's not at a disadvantage because she's in an environment that's built for people like her. And
Exactly.
so it's goes to show like how situational some things are, and like if the infrastructure is built with like accessibility aids, then things can be more or less disabling depending on if the world is built around that. So
Exactly.
um, I'm really glad that you brought that up and that you can share that perspective. I think that's really important, and
Thank you.
that we can get all these different perspectives on these interviews. Just yesterday, I was doing one for a book that I posted the interview today, and it's with an autistic protagonist. And it's like there's so many different ways to be autistic, and there's no
Yeah.
one size fits all way to write that kind of representation. So I think it's really important to share all of these different perspectives, and I really appreciate you bringing that up.
Thank you. No, I agree. I do think that it's it's a broad label, being disabled, and I think everyone can fit it or not fit it in different ways. And it's like you said, it's important to get the different viewpoints and to see how other people experience life. And I think that's a great medium within writing. You're stepping into the mindset of someone else's life, whether they're fictional or not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. My last question is, what else are you writing? What do you have coming up, and where can we find you online?
So I'm currently finishing up book 2, Darkling. Um, that's it's coming along slowly. It's been a much more difficult book to write than Changeling was, um, but it's getting there. I am in the final section at last. Um, but you can find me on most social medias under author A Holmes, and Changeling is available on ebook on pretty much all ebook retailers, including Smashwords and Itch.io, and the paperback and hardback can be found through Amazon.
Awesome, perfect. I also wanted to mention, you said that there is a discount, that it is uh, on sale this month until August 30th, and the
Yes,
discount code will be available in the description of this video. So I will make
yes,
sure to put links to everything so that you can buy the book, and to all of Arista's social medias so that you can go follow her. So
thank you. It's
thank you so much.
just through Smashwords that that sale.
Gotcha. So, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today. I really enjoyed this.
Thank you for having me, Etta.